Welcome to Mile High Sports Today. I'm Sean Drotar. That's Nate Lundy. Danny Bailey, you can't see him, but he's the one that makes everything work. Thanks for joining us. It is a Thursday night football as football week kicks off, of course, for the pros and for the Denver Broncos.
Yeah, today, first 55 days in a row.
55 straight days of which some kind of football is on. That's going to be
Isn't it crazy to think, by the way, that streak comes to an end the day before Thanksgiving?
Yeah.
They give everybody a chance to go.
One deep breath. Then
and
all
then
sorts of
just
football.
Stuff your face with food and football. I love it.
It's going to be a tremendous amount of fun for the Broncos and the Raiders. Now, Broncos wearing the old Orange Crush jerseys and that combo from the 70s.
Week.
Yeah, they should. And
just
actually,
bring them back.
If you listen to one Pat Surtain, that's exactly what he would do. He said it was his favorite of all of them. At the very least, you could go with the existing uniforms and bring back the royal blue instead of the navy blue. I think that would be.
I just want the helmets.
You go back to the helmets.
I love that old school, which you would need to then do the baby blue. Right.
You got at least the royal. Yeah, that royal kind of blue.
Damn it, that helmet is sexy.
Yeah, it's always looked good.
It just looks good.
You can totally do it with the existing stuff. And I actually do think the Broncos probably realize that and are putting some things together there. But for the Broncos, the big game against the Raiders, and we'll have an opportunity to talk about them in just a little bit with JT the Brick from the Raiders broadcast. Nobody better than JT the Brick out in Vegas. He'll be joining us. Looking forward to that. We'll also talk about the Denver Nuggets, even though we talk about all the football. Nuggets preseason starts tomorrow in Abu Dhabi in the United Arab Emirates. So when that game tips off, it'll be 10 in the morning over here. So we're going to take a check in with Ryan Blackburn about that. He is not in Dubai and
no. What makes you think I've got that kind of budget?
I don't know. I just wanted to see. I didn't know if my text would go all the way there. I wasn't sure, but we will have Blackburn joining us as well.
Sending Blackburn over there.
Yeah.
By the way, you've seen the pictures.
You got to get shots probably.
You got to make sure. You got to make sure you ask him about. You saw all of them riding the camels that got posted on social media.
Right.
Man, Aaron Gordon looked like he was in heaven. He was just having a blast, man. He was loving it.
So he could go and invest like Nikola Jokic did, and maybe he can do camel racing.
He probably can.
Camel racing. That's a thing.
I absolutely it is. But those guys, they look like they're having a good time. What a fun experience for them. And an opportunity to do something really cool that the NBA put together. I love it.
Yeah, I like the idea too. You start with the last two champions. You have them go at it, 2 games out there. Obviously, it's preseason, but there's still value in it, and expanding the NBA game has value as well. Looking at the Broncos coming up on Sunday, of course, this game all of a sudden is pretty important. The Broncos, Raiders, and Chargers all tied at 2-2 in the AFC West. The AFC in general, not super impressive. The league in the early going of the first month, just pretty sloppy, undistinguished football in which it was difficult to find a lot of teams that really stood out. So you and I still don't believe the Broncos are going to make the playoffs. I don't believe the Broncos are going to win more than 6 games on the outside. But at the same time, you don't know, right? And you go out and get a win. You're 3-2. You find yourself in a good spot in the division, and you keep it rolling. The players can't afford to think that way. They need to go out and get wins. The Raiders have won the last 8. This is a problem. It goes back a ways. And Max Crosby looks like he may be able to be back for this game. Max Crosby has 13.5 sacks in his 10 career games against the Broncos, of which the Raiders have won 9, including the 8 straight since. But for Bo Nix, coming into this game, after the performance in the Jets game where, look, you get a win, and that excuses a lot. But it wasn't a good performance. I understand the weather has a lot to do with this. But when we were talking this time last week, we were talking about a really good performance against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, in which we're like, this is what Bo Nix can be. Mm-hmm. Now we've seen 3 underwhelming games, and maybe I'm being nice, and 1 good game. Is there anything that makes you believe that facing a Raiders team that is, by the way, just riddled with injuries, their injury list, if you printed it out, it would have taken 2 pages. It was crazy. Is there any reason to believe that Bo Nix is going to take a big leap forward, look at least as good as he looked in Tampa Bay, or is that maybe the high watermark for a while?
Well, I think there's actually a couple things that play into it, and I want to go away from Bo for a second, and that is to the defense. I think part of what Bo was able to do in that game in particular against Tampa I think that part of what Bo was able to do in that game was because the defense was playing lights out. Let's remember in the 2 games coming into that, it's, Baker Mayfield looked meh against Detroit. Like, it wasn't bad, but he was kind of middle of the pack. But remember, in week 1, he looked really good against the Commanders. He did okay against Detroit. And remember, they won the game against Detroit, even though he only passed the ball 19 times. And then all of a sudden he looked like crap against the Broncos before turning around and bouncing back last week against Philly. Okay. So part of it for me with Bo, and I do want to talk specifically about what I think Bo can do or can't do, as you brought up, but I do think it's important to recognize that if Vance Joseph and the defense can do some good things like they did against Baker Mayfield, that it could get interesting for Bo, because he might be able to sit back, and he might even be sitting back with a lead, right, where he can relax, very similar to what happened with Tampa, right? And so, yeah, they only put 26 points on the board, but they held Tampa to 7, which means Bo wasn't sitting there scoreboard and clock watching, right, where he's worried about, okay, how much time do I have left to be able to get, try to get us back in this game or whatever. The defense was doing it for him. And taking a guy like Baker Mayfield and giving him a QBR that was sub 15. Like, it was bad against that defense. Well, guess what? Now you get Gardner Minshew, all right, who has basically thrown a pick in every game, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe didn't do it last week, but he did, I think, in the first 3 games. You think a guy like Pat Surtain and Riley Moss and the rest of them aren't chomping at the bit to be able to take the ball away? And if they can do that, this comes back to Sean's question. See what I did here? We're bringing it all together, folks. It's just like a beautiful tapestry of football. I'm bringing it back to it. If the defense can do that, what will happen? Like, go to the Jets game for just a second. As nasty and bleh as the weather was, and the wet ball, and it was affecting Bo, and it was affecting Aaron, and all of that, what did the defense do? They gave him really good field position, right? Mm-hmm. They gave him really good field position. And if they can do that again here at home with the crowd on his side in much better weather. Have you looked at the forecast? It's gorgeous on Sunday. That, I think, can in part set up what you and I both need to see Bo do. So now we can talk about what we want to see Bo do.
Yes.
But what I wanted to do was point out the fact that what Vance Joseph is doing may actually play into what we want Bo to do.
Yes, and certainly, you're talking about complementary football. If the defense does this job, that makes a massive amount of difference. But for the Broncos, one of the things they have to do that they haven't yet is capitalize on positive field position. Things have been problematic for the Broncos when it comes to capitalizing on their field position. They haven't been good at it, and it's been a bit of a problem for Knicks. Some of this has to do with the fact it's play calling to an extent.
Oh, yeah.
And the weather, we have to consider some of that too. But Nate, the idea of when you look at what Knicks is completing, okay, when he's throwing more than 10 yards downfield, he's completing only 29% of his passes. That's bad. It's a problem. But 62% of his passes are within 10 yards of the line of scrimmage.
Yes.
Now, that's also bad, and I'll explain why it's bad. Now, obviously, you can't worry about Bo Nix and say you have to push it downfield if he's not ready to push downfield, or if he doesn't have time, or a million other things. That's part of it. And one of the things I looked at when I really looked at all the charts for Nix was the idea that, is he leaning too far to the right? For certain receivers, he is. For example, Troy Franklin has yet to catch any pass, even be targeted on the left side of the field. He does spread the ball around from left and right. It's actually pretty equal across the board. But until Bo Nix starts pushing the ball down the field with success, defenses are now able to creep up closer and closer and closer, because they don't believe that, one, the Broncos are going to call a play any further than 10 yards down the field. And two, even if he does, there's no guarantee that Nix can complete them. He's completing fewer than 1 out of every 3. So one of the challenges there for Nix is he's got to be able to complete passes in this game, in nice weather, against a team that's beaten up and a team that isn't any better than the Broncos. He's got to be able to push the ball down the field with success. And we haven't seen him do it yet with any consistency. Some of that's on Nix, some of that's on Payton. But the longer it takes for that to occur, the easier it is for defenses to scheme against him, and the easier it is for people to stop the Broncos defense. So some of this is a matter of being aggressive, both as a play caller in Sean Payton's case and as a quarterback in Bo Nix, and they may have to this week decide to put their minds to doing it. When in doubt, we are going to be aggressive and push the ball down the field. Get some of that mojo, that confidence from Vance Joseph's side of the field. He feels pretty good about going for it.
Yeah, I think they can do that, but I also want to point this out. Right now, in terms of deep ball attempts, according to Player Profiler, Bo Nix is 5th in the league.
Right, but he can't complete them.
But they're trying. I guess that's my point. Okay. It's okay. He's not completing them. You're exactly right. Those are not getting completed at the level that they want. But to give you an example, Gardner Minshew is 22nd in the league in deep ball attempts. He's only done 10 all year. Now, some of that, he hasn't had Devontae Adams. And he's not going to have him this weekend.
Right.
But there are some deep ball attempts being tried, right? Does he need to complete them? Yes. So I think that what we need to do is there have been some play calls designed for him to try to get the ball down the field. He's not holding up his end of it, or the receivers are not holding up their end of it. And sometimes it's a little bit of both. Let's be honest. But I do think that he's trying. Do I think they can do more of that now that they're at home? Yes. Remember, they've played 3 of the first 4 on the road, right? They've only played at Empower once. And now they get a chance to be at home here for back-to-back games. And I think that's a big deal for this team, especially in games that are winnable, by the way. So I think I think we may see some positive momentum in terms of what he can do, what he's expected to do, and what the play calling may look like. But I really do believe that even for the short tenure that it was, and as bad of a tenure as it was, Vance Joseph's time as a head coach and his time as a coordinator and a position coach in the NFL, he knows that the performance that he can do with his guys on the defensive side of the ball will translate over to Bo and the offense. And I think VJ is smart enough to know that. And I think he sees an opportunity, especially in these next 2 games, to keep momentum going with his defense. And in doing so, continue to give his quarterback and his offensive side of the ball the opportunity to improve.
Yeah, and when you look at the 23 quarterbacks who have thrown 10 or more attempts, more than 20 yards downfield, the deep balls, as you pointed out, Nix was 17. That is tied for 4th in the league, and number one, surprisingly, maybe, is Caleb Williams.
Yes,
at number 1 there, and he's actually completing at a worse percentage than Nix. In fact, he's completing it at half, 13.6. But to get an idea of maybe it's not reason to panic, the 29.4% downfield for Bo Nix is not good, but there are quarterbacks that are worse. Daniel Jones, of course, I don't know if you want to be compared to Daniel Jones in any way right now, but there are other quarterbacks you probably would be favorably compared to. Justin Herbert, Jalen Hurts, both completing at a lower percentage than Bo Nix, 20 yards down the field. So again, this has been an odd first 4 weeks to the NFL season, where scoring is way down, passing is way down. You're seeing it much harder to complete the passes at any level. So maybe there's no reason to panic about Nix. And the recency bias, when you look at the game of in New York and think, wow, 60 yards, the lowest any quarterback's thrown in a win since 2007. Well, that's not the stat to take away from it. The stat is the win, the win part.
Yeah. You have to take away what you
would you rather have 60 in a win or 244 in a loss? What did we say?
What did we say going into the Jets game? You are what your record says you are. And that's wins and losses. Wins and losses are what matter. And this team is 2-2 when I did not expect them to be 2-2. I thought at best they'd be 1-3. And so they've already improved. Look, that's why I keep saying I 10,000% agree with you that there are things that Bo Nix needs to be able to do and that he has to improve upon. He is number 1 in the league in interceptable passes thrown.
That is bad. That's maybe the worst stat to be number 1 in the league in.
Take everything else out of the equation for me. The number of deep balls he's thrown, the number he's completed, anything like that. He is number 1 in the NFL.
Do you have that number?
In interceptable passes. He's thrown 8 of them.
And he's at 4 picks.
8 passes that, according to the deep dive analytics,
lucky it was only 50.
Could have or should have been intercepted. Right? So you might be 0-4, depending upon how those map out. And I haven't taken the time to map them out. I'm just looking at the total number here so far.
But here's the number that I think that correlates with that, because I was looking at that as well. 6 of those 8 interceptable balls happened without pressure on the quarterback.
Got to be smart.
He's got to be better in deciding when and where to throw the football and make those decisions, and that's a big part of it.
Absolutely, you have to. Hey, I want to highlight something that our friends at number 38 are doing. Anilo and Chase had a chance to talk about this on the SCO show. That is posted up on YouTube. Danny, that got posted this morning, right? Yep, it's up on I just had to make sure. It is up there for this morning. They are doing a really cool CU meet and greet tomorrow night at number 38. You got an opportunity. I want to make sure that I get all the information on this right. DJ McKinney, Cameron Silman Craig, both of those guys are going to be there. They've got a live DJ. Our guys, Danny's going to be down there. Danny Bailey will be there. Anil Peer will be there. Chase Howell. The guys are going to be there. So it's bye week, obviously, for CU, but that isn't stopping us from partnering up with our friends at number 38 who have become the spot to watch these Buffs games. But this time, it's actually a Friday night meet and greet with these guys. So Buffs fans, get down there. This is a great opportunity. Again, DJ McKinney and Cameron Silman Craig will be down there. It starts at 6 o'clock, goes from 6 to 8, but you're going to want to get there early. If it's anything like what our watch parties have been like, there's going to be a big crowd. It's obviously also going to be a Friday night with nice weather at one of the best spots in Rhino to hang out, which is number 38. So get down there early. Go check it out. You can actually RSVP for free. Just kind of like give this heads up, like, hey, I'm coming. They start thinking about the crowds and all that kind of stuff. If you just Google, it'll be easier. Number 38. Check them out in Rhino, one of our favorite places to be, but a really cool event, Sean, tomorrow night that they are doing with the Buffs, with a little meet and greet here on the bye week. So Buffs fans, if you're still riding the high from the beatdown that happened in Central Florida,
why would you not?
Carry it on tomorrow night, and we will see you down at number 38 tomorrow night. Again, it starts at 6, but trust me, folks, try to get there by 5 if you can. I know we've got work and things like that on a Friday, but try to get there as early as you can because I guarantee it's going to be a great crowd. Yeah, McKinney and Silman Craig, two of the guys that have been key in the turnaround of the Buffs defense. Silman Craig, now the team's leader in tackles. McKinney, the team's leader in passes defense. Travis Hunter may grab him here and there, but when he's talking about knocking him down, McKinney's been one of the major guys. So I wanted to make sure we did not forget to promote that here as we get ready for this really cool Friday night event. A really cool event. And it's free, folks. It's free. Just get your butts down there. You got to go. And go check out I don't have one out here. I've got one in my office. When you get down there, if you want. I saw this. If you decide you want like some water. I'm disappointed you didn't get me one. If you want some water. If you want some water, they've got these cans of water. Like you can get a bucket of them. You can get a bucket of them, and they've got Betty and Peggy on the can. They're so cool. Trust me, you're just going to want, you're going to hydrate. Highly recommend hydrating. Well, just like our friends at Crown Royal will tell you. Hydrate. But you're going to want to take that can home with you. Danny's seen them. I think Danny left with 6 or 8 packs of them. You drank 4 of them? Man, that guy's hydrated. Yeah, good. Well, that's midway through the show today. You're going to wind up having JT on coming up here in 15 minutes, and Danny's going to have to get up, go across the hall, and pee. Disappear. But that's good. That's healthy. It's smart. So anyway, hydrate. You know what? When you get down there, grab some of those cans of water because they're cool. Right. Well, I got to get down there and get some of mine. Sean's mad because I brought a couple back and they're in the office. I saw it on your shelf. It's sitting there. I'm like, where's that? You said 30. I'm like, well, thanks for remembering me, Nate. Jeez. Sitting right here. I'm just saying. God, it's pretty cool. I'll go down and get my own. Yeah, go down there and get your own. I don't need you. I'll just go get it myself. But you look really funny because you're carrying around like a bucket of Peggy and Betty. It's pretty funny. Fantastic. The Broncos wide receiver situation, as we look at Bo Nix, is I went and did something dangerous this morning. I went and did some math. Okay. Oh, dangerous thing I did this morning was an SGP on the game tonight. Oh, well, I did some of those too, but I decided to get into math, which is not a great idea at any point in the day for me. Definitely not in the morning. But when you look at the Broncos wide receiver situation and we look at Bo Nix's passing in this game and what the Broncos need to do, it's interesting to try to take a look at how this shakes out because Cortland Sutton in the Jets game had 60 yards on 3 catches, Bo Nix's first ever touchdown, but the other receivers for the Broncos had no yards on 9 catches. Now, not all of them had 0, but they all came out to 0 yards on 9 catches. That's
unbelievable. Now, went over the passing snaps over the course of the season, and that's just the snaps in which there were pass plays. Not surprisingly, Cortland Sutton leads that with 148, Josh Reynolds 116. Maybe surprisingly for some people, third is little Jordan Humphrey with 104. Then it gets interesting. Troy Franklin, who was basically invisible and inactive in game one in Seattle, up to 32. Devon Vele, who probably had more, but he got her at 31. Marvin Mims, out of wide receivers, dead last, 29 total passing play snaps. Now, we know that Cortland Sutton is wide receiver 1. We know that in theory, Josh Reynolds is wide receiver 2, but it seems like it hasn't gone going. Again, that's not really the case. Reynolds only has 18 fewer yards on the year than Sutton, but he's had 47% of Sutton's targets. Should the Broncos be looking a little bit more Josh Reynolds' way, and specifically, is that more of a Sean Payton thing or a Bo Nix thing?
Well, it makes me wonder how he's going through the progressions. Obviously, that's part of the question. Where is in a particular play call, where is Josh Reynolds within the progression compared to Cortland, compared to Humphrey, et cetera? Do I think they should be looking his way? I think this comes down to some coverage stuff, Sean, and I think it's going to play into a lot of what happens with the secondary of all of the different teams that they face off. And look, they have a great opportunity this weekend because of a banged up Raiders team. And we'll talk to JT the Brick here in a minute about that. But I think you need to be looking to try to spread the ball out a little bit. And part of the reason I believe in that, and part of the reason I think that some of the opportunity share and the snap counts and the snap percentages you want to spread it out a little bit, is because I'm a big believer in doing that and swaying it and trying to influence the defense then allows your wide receiver 1 to play a bigger role. We've talked about this before. I like Cortland Sutton a lot. I believe Cortland Sutton is a wide receiver 2 on just about any other team in the league. He at this point in his career is not what I would consider an elite wide receiver. He is, in my opinion, the best receiver the Broncos have on the roster, but in stepping back and looking at it from the 20,000 foot level, he's a WR2. And I think that if there is some play calling that can be done to establish him more as a WR1 by incorporating Reynolds and the rest of the guys, that if that sort of thing can happen, then yes, you may wind up elevating him because you're trying to elevate the rest of the guys, right? You're trying to share that out a little bit, and you're trying to pull that defense and not let them just focus on one side of the field.
Yeah, because I think at a certain point you do have to look at the way these things are happening. And Sutton obviously has gotten the lion's share of the targets, but yards per target, I went back and did that as well. And Sutton's at 5.3. That's third among the 6 receivers who have gotten targets. Reynolds is at 10.2, so nearly double Sutton's in fewer than half his targets. So the idea that Reynolds at least has been pretty effective for Nix when he goes that direction is interesting. Little Jordan Humphrey ahead of Sutton as well at 5.8, Vele at 4.9, Mims at 4.8, kind of a disturbing number for a guy in theory that's supposed to be a deep threat, and Franklin at a highly disturbing 0.9 per target, because basically he only gets thrown to the right side at or behind the line of scrimmage thus far, but already jumped up to 4th in passing play snaps among wide receivers. So it's a little bit of both. I think the Broncos ended up selecting Troy Franklin. They liked what he can do, and I like what he can do too. I think it'll take a little bit of time. They're asking a lot more of him, but they don't really have a true slot receiver. A little Jordan Humphrey is the guy playing in the slot. The guy who has the second most snaps in the slot is Sutton. So you're in a sort of a weird spot there when it comes to play design. So it's a little bit of both, right? They don't have talent up and down their room. There is talent, but as you put it, I think you're right. Cortland Sutton is probably a wide receiver 2 on most good teams. We know that that's exactly what Josh Reynolds is. He's a 2 on a good team. Sometimes he's a 3. Yeah. Little Jordan Humphrey is a 3 at best.
He's a 3-ish.
Yeah, 3-ish. That's a nice one. Troy Franklin at Vele, we don't know really what they are yet, but probably not likely to be wide receiver 1s at the NFL level. I guess Franklin has an outside shot.
And Mims, in my opinion, and Mims, in my opinion, is a special teams.
He's a non-factor.
He's a special teams guy that you occasionally throw out there.
Right. And that's, I think, the part for Broncos fans that's maybe been the hardest thing. And I talked about it last year, because you could talk about Russell Wilson all you want, but Sean Payton decides when Marvin Mims is on the field. So some of the things we have to parse all that out. When Payton was angry with Wilson, and he was angry with Wilson a lot about a lot of different things, but he wasn't angry with Wilson all that much for not going to Mims, because Mims wasn't on the field that often. About 1 every 5 snaps in general, Mims was on the field last year. So that can't really be put on Wilson. Wilson's not deciding who's on the field and who's not. And if he's only on the field 1 every 5 plays, he's not going to get a lot of catches. They maybe had more talent in the receiving room last year when they had Jerry Jeudy available, but it probably wasn't a massive difference from Josh Reynolds, not particularly. I mean, production, probably not much difference at all. But you have the same talent in the room that you did last year. Marvin Mims did not get into the field of play in the offense for any stretch of time. He's not doing it again this year, only 29 snaps in 4 games. For Broncos fans who watched Marvin Mims as the first Sean Payton pick in the 2nd round, the first pick he made, then realize that you basically just picked a return specialist. I think for Broncos fans, that's kind of frustrating. But it is the reality, Nate. At this point, that's what at least Sean Payton thinks Marvin Mims is, because the proof is in the pudding here. He's on the field for these plays, and he's off the field for these other plays. You can tell what Sean Payton thinks because that's where he plays him.
Yeah, I mean, I don't hate the idea of bringing in somebody that can be a return specialist when they changed the kickoff rules.
But they didn't do that till this year.
Yeah,
they drafted him last year.
I get it. I get it. I think they were trying to find some piecemeal things when it came to the wide receiver room. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I think they are. I think there is a long-term plan in place, and that right now what has to happen is you got to try to find a way to utilize these guys as best you can within their skill sets. And then cross your fingers. I mean, I just being honest.
What do you think that plan is, both short and long term?
I think they want to try to boost up Cortland. I think they want to utilize Cortland more, and continue to try to show him as a wide receiver 1.
Are they trying to trade him? Are they?
I don't know. I don't know.
Trade him in the offseason?
Maybe they've had a conversation with him and said, "Prove to us you're a WR1."
Then we can get you paid. But until then, yeah.
Until then, you haven't shown us. So I think there's a lot in play here. I also think that they are likely disappointed in what has transpired so far with Troy Franklin. Not that they're giving up on him by any stretch.
He's getting more and more plays.
Yes. But I think that there was probably an expectation that he would be further along here on October 3rd than he is at this point.
I think that's fair.
Okay. And so I think there's probably some things that they have wanted to be able to do, or plays that they would like to be able to execute more often, formations, whatever you want to call it. But because Troy Franklin has not established himself to this point, it also means that defenses are, I don't want to say they don't have to take him seriously, but you get what I mean, right? Like they're not having to look at him going, oh man, this guy burned Tampa for X, or he did this against that Jets defense, or he did, right? Where a defensive coordinator is having to go, wait a minute, we got to think about this guy. Right now, in my opinion, the only guy in the receiving core that you have to frankly spend a whole lot of time thinking about if you're a defensive coordinator on the other side of the ball is Cortland Sutton. I mean, we talk all the time about the idea back in the day that, you know, Bill Belichick's genius as a coach was that he would take your best offensive player and do his best to basically make him a non-factor in the game. That was that was what he did. He was very, very, very good at it, of being able to neutralize whatever they believed your biggest threat is. Who's the biggest threat? Right now, the biggest threat is Cortland Sutton. And Sean and I just got done telling you that on most teams, he would be a wide receiver too. There's nothing wrong with that, but that's who he is at this point. And so if that's the case, these other guys need to step up, or they need to become a little bit more involved in the offense, so that a defensive coordinator has to actually take Cortland Sutton more seriously. Because now, wait a minute, we're drawing some guys over here. Now he's left open the way we want to leave him open. And we want to find some opportunities to get him the ball, just like they did with the touchdown against the Jets. I think those are the things that are playing out right now. And I think Troy Franklin is part of that. And the rest of it is, as our friend Joel Klatt has said over and over and over again, wide receiver is a dependent position. And right now they're all, including Cortland Sutton, dependent on a rookie.
Yeah, it's the dependent position. I mean, everything has to go right for the wide receivers. And
Notice
I think
we didn't talk a damn bit about the tight end, but don't get me started about that. That's just going to piss me off.
They don't have one yet. That's why.
That's just going to
do anything in the passing game.
They haven't had one for 8 years.
Well, they get to see one on Sunday. His name's Brock Bowers.
God,
they see one that looks like that. But keep in mind, too, the Broncos, I think, to go along with what Nate's saying, too, what Sean Payton is doing. We talk about Payton as guys, and he has a type. Cortland Sutton is 6'4". Josh Reynolds is 6'3". Little Jordan Humphrey is 6'4". Franklin is 6'3". Vele 6'5". Well, what did that come with? A catch radius, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And if you're Bo Nix and you're trying to figure everything out and get accurate, well, having a little more margin for error from guys that are 6'4", 6'5", have arms that are bigger than 5'11" Marvin Mims. And by the way, I've stood next to Marvin Mims, and if he's 5'11", I'm about 6'1", and I assure you that I am not.
Yeah.
So that may be part of it too. But obviously, the Broncos have work to do here. It feels like this time next week, Nate, we need to be talking about significant improvement in the passing game, efficiency, depth, explosiveness, or there is reason to be concerned going forward. I think when you're 5 games in and you're not seeing it, it's a problem. So hopefully it starts moving forward. Of course, you get to hear me talk a lot about our friends at the Denver Athletic Club, and there's a good reason for it, because the Denver Athletic Club is the perfect place to work, play, exercise, and socialize right in the heart of downtown Denver. Top-notch amenities, the full fitness center you expect, but licensed childcare center, spa, massage, Pilates, golf simulators. Anila who's a member there, was telling me about the cold plunge pool and the bowling alley. Our friend Doug Ottaway earlier this week's a member as well, talked about how basically he's happy they just don't kick him out because he works there and then comes back, gets a workout, goes back and works some more. But what really sets it apart is that vibrant member-owned community, all sorts of different events year-round, socially, co-working, dining, fun for the entire family. The DAC is a club for your whole life. So look into joining the DAC today. Visit DenverAthleticClub.cc for all the details. Delighted to be joined by our next guest. Haven't had an opportunity to talk to him on this program yet. The one and only JT the Brick. You can hear him on the Raiders broadcast, and of course, one of the most notable and significant sports radio personalities over the last 20 years. So good to see you, old friend. Thanks for carving out some time.
Yeah, good to see you, my friend, and good to be back here with what seems to be a really, really big game for two teams that are struggling mightily offensively to get their seasons going, and something has to give. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, the Broncos walked away with a win in one of those low-scoring affairs last week, the rainy affair in New York, obviously, but an unimpressive performance by Bo Nix, even though they did get the job done. The Broncos' offense has been a problem, and it's been a problem for a while. Max Crosby missed last week's game. Let's just start there. We know that Broncos fans have visions of him in their nightmares. So what's the latest on Crosby? The word, at least out here, was that he was going to try to go this week.
Yeah, he said on his podcast he'd try to go. The Raiders injury report, which I have here in front of me, is one of the most brutal injury reports I've ever seen. This is my 27th year with the team, and I have never seen an injury report like this, as in never, where Max Crosby, obviously I'm sure you're going to want to mention Devontae, looks like Devontae, that relationship could be coming to an end at some point, but he's got an injury. He would have played in this game if he was 100%. Divine Diablo, starting linebackers out. Thayer Mumford, the right tackle, didn't participate. Michael Mayer out of Notre Dame has personal issues, so we can't comment much on that. You got an Achilles issue with the starting right guard who didn't participate. Colton Miller, who's their best player, didn't participate yesterday. So, and then I look at the Broncos injury report, and the only one who didn't participate, I believe, was Batty. So the Broncos look to be close to 100%, and the Raiders got 8 or 9 players, but 6 or 7 starters who could be out of this game. I think Max will go. But the cool thing that's happening now in Vegas is that there's a lot of camaraderie and players coming together. The Raiders actually have a really good, I tell everybody before the season, as the NFL didn't acknowledge the Raiders, the Raiders suck again. No, they don't. They won 8 games last year. 8. Not that that's great in Raider history, but they're getting treated like a 3 or 4 win team in the offseason, and they're better than most people think. Now, fortunately, they can go to their subs, their practice squad players, and their backups, who are pretty decent. They're not Devontae Adams and Max Crosby, but these are guys who are going to get an opportunity to play and give them a puncher's chance in a must-win game. We just had a must-win game against Cleveland and pulled it out. And this feels like another, I'm not going to call it a must-win. You can't do that every week. But this game's really important because it's an AFC West divisional game, and the Raiders lost their road opener to the Chargers in the division, so they need to grab one.
Yeah, and everybody that's not the Chiefs is 2-2, and that part's kind of interesting as well. Crosby in the 10 games he's played against the Broncos in his career, by the way, 13 and a half sacks. So, he gets after the quarterback. He could face off against Alex Palczewski, who's been starting the last couple of games in place of Mike McGlinchey, who's on the injured list. So that's obviously something to keep an eye out if Crosby's able to go. But yeah, you look at these two teams that have the offensive struggles, and Crosby's one side of it, but Devontae Adams, that situation. Let's touch on that, because you talk about the camaraderie and you talk about how they've kind of come together, but obviously the relationship between Antonio Pierce and Devontae Adams has decayed to the point where Adams apparently wants out. Now, to an extent, Adams wanted to join the Raiders because he wanted to join his old college teammate in Fresno State, Derek Carr, who's now in New Orleans, and the Saints and the Jets seem to be the two most likely destinations, according to the people who care about such things, because of the relationship he has with both those quarterbacks. But how has the Adams situation dented that camaraderie in the locker room, or has it? Has Adams' own viewpoint separated him from the rest of the team?
No, it hasn't. And I can only comment so much on this because he's on the Raiders and he's a member of the team still. I can just tell you that Devontae's been a great teammate. He loves the Raiders. He always wanted to play for the Raiders. His wife loves Vegas. He loves Vegas. So all the stuff about Devontae, because of the Netflix series. So let's get back to the Netflix series. The Netflix series comes out. It's Josh McDaniels. It's Jimmy Garoppolo. Devontae's getting blown up. And you see, they only edit. They don't edit the game where the Raiders beat Kansas City. They're the last team, by the way, to beat Kansas City. They don't edit the wins. They're just editing Devontae being upset that he's getting blown up by Jimmy Garoppolo. Makes for better television. It's a TV show. But every time, including this week with Kay Adams and Up and Adams, this week, whenever he's asked about the Raiders, he loves the Raiders, loves Vegas and all that. Now there's noise. I think probably most of the noise is coming from his agent. And, Antonio Pierce has been a great players coach. You've seen the video of the smoking cigars in the locker room. He won a Super Bowl as a member of the Giants. The team really likes him. He's a players coach. He took over for Josh McDaniels, who you're familiar with in Denver. So a lot of this is all about hype and media. And look, if Devontae ends up wanting to leave and they end up moving him, wish the best to Devontae. He was really good while he played here. It's a shame that he really has a hamstring injury, because if he didn't have this hamstring tweak, which happened at the end of the third game, then we're starting to talk about Devontae being healthy. And if he's 100% healthy, I don't think you're going to hear anything about Devontae being moved, because I don't think the Raiders would want to move him. But with this hamstring now, everything's kind of pivoted this week. It's unfortunate.
Yeah, and you think about the matchup that we would have been able to see, Devontae Adams versus Pat Surtain. That would have been obviously a treat for football fans, because these two teams, let's be nice about it, they have struggled over the last few years as Kansas City's dominated the division. Since 2020, the Raiders are 24-35, the Broncos are 25-33. They've looked essentially the same, but the Raiders have 8 straight wins over the Broncos. Now, it seems like in that span of time, the Broncos have had a litany of coaches and a litany of quarterbacks and no real direction. But what do you actually sort of contribute that to? Or is it just one of those things that you play enough times, like the series goes back all the way to the AFL days, that some of these streaks happen?
It's a great question. You nailed it with streaks. Streaks happen. But this is a big streak because Denver's never beaten the Las Vegas Raiders.
True.
Right? The Oakland Raiders, the LA Raiders, they've never beaten the Las Vegas Raiders. And the Raiders have had some pretty good teams, average to good. A playoff team, 8 wins, 9 wins. The Raiders are pretty good, and the Raiders put up a good game plan against the Broncos. I was a Russell Wilson guy. Look, I think if you left Russell Wilson alone and let him play, he eventually was going to figure it out. That's in the past. Derek Carr played well in the rivalry. Remember, the Raiders over the last 4 or 5 Denver games had Darren Waller, Hunter Renfrow, Devontae Adams, Max Crosby, some really good players who got after the Broncos. But for whatever reason, there's been a big transition from Vic Fangio to Sean Payton, my good friend Johnny Morton, who really my neighbor here when in Vegas when he was with the Raiders, was with Denver. What a coach he is. The Raiders have stayed in some close games. Drew Lock played one of the toughest games I ever saw in Vegas. He went to the locker room with a rib injury, came out, kept him in the game, and the Raiders have just been a little bit better. But now this game is really important because I had the Broncos going 0-4 when they were 0-2. There's no chance in hell they were going to beat Baker Mayfield in Tampa. As you recall, Derek Carr and Baker Mayfield after week 2 were the MVPs of the league. I know it's week 2, but they were identical. Baker was unbelievable and Derek Carr was even better. So I'm looking at the Broncos going, they're going to get slaughtered in Tampa. No chance. They win that game. And I pay attention. I go, whoa, we got the Broncos in 2 weeks. What the hell was that? So I went back and watched the game, and man, the Broncos defense and the penetration with that interior defensive line and Surtain, okay. Then they go play the Jets. The Jets have a really good chance to be a playoff team and do some great things. And the one game they can't lose at home is to Bo Nix. You can't lose that game at home. In Denver, anybody can lose in Denver. Anybody can lose in Denver if Denver's is ripping. Bo throws for 60 yards and wins the game. Rodgers has got his own team jumping off sides with cadences that is supposed to give him free plays and an easy victory. Once they won that game, I picked up the phone and talked to everybody in the Raiders. I'm like, here we go. And now I find out that Denver's going to have alumni weekend, and they're bringing back their alumni, and they're wearing their throwback jerseys. So you can tell Sean Payton wants to stop this losing streak. I think the Raiders have their hands full. If the Raiders were 100% healthy, like I talked about, I think they're a better team. I think they win this game if they have Malcolm Kuntz, who's gone for the year, a great young defensive end, and Max has got a high ankle sprain. That changes everything. So I think the Raiders are going to be in a dogfight, and like Cleveland, they're going to have to hope that they're in the game, having the ball late with an opportunity to maybe win it on special teams, win it on the ground, do something special, because Brock Bowers, Jacoby Myers, Trey Tucker are all going to be there. And those guys are playmakers for the Silver and Black.
Yeah, the Broncos going back to the Orange Crush uniforms this weekend from the 70s. They'll also be inducting Steve Foley and Riley Odom's blast from the past into the Ring of Fame as well. And Randy Gradishar is going to get his Hall of Fame ring as well. So the Broncos are pulling out all the stops for this classic rivalry. But you said you spoke to everyone in the Raiders, and of course you had a chance to speak with Antonio Pierce recently, and he talked about the Broncos defense, talked about Vance Joseph in particular. He's been the talk of the town here. The Broncos ex-coach turned defensive coordinator has been getting that defense into phenomenal position. Pierce with you called them stingy, said that they were tough, said they were finding themselves in the right places. They were disguising a lot. What do you see with the Raiders offense and the Broncos defense, especially over the last couple games, where you think that the Raiders might be able to take some advantage?
Well, it's tough because Denver, I was talking about this with Lincoln Kennedy. Lincoln Kennedy is one of the great Raiders. Remember the snowball game where they threw the snowball at Lincoln and he went into the stands, and Lincoln really gets fired up for the Denver game. Denver's a team that's always recently, they built their defense from the back to the front. They always have great safeties and corners. So that's tough for the Raiders because even with Devontae, and Devontae was pretty good against Surtain early. When you went up against Denver, you knew if you put the ball in the air, Denver's going to go for the ball. Raiders don't do that. Unfortunately, the Raiders for a long time don't have ball hawks. They got safeties who play deep center field. Their corners, Jack Jones. Watch this kid, Jacorian Bennett, who wears number 0. He's really good, and he's one of their corners, but he's young. I'm sure Bo's going to try to pick on him a bit. But then you go to Denver and the linebackers, and then you get to the defensive line from Von Miller, some of the players that they've had in the past. But whenever we go up against the Broncos, I'm always worried about the errant throw over the middle of the field. And Gardner Minshew, oh my God, Gardner Minshew after week 2 led the NFL in completion percentage. And he beat Baltimore in Baltimore. And that final 12 minutes of Gardner Minshew was bleeping brilliant. You looked at Minshew and said, oh my God, this is the guy we want. This is the guy we want. Hasn't shown up since. And he's playing in this game. And I wouldn't have been shocked if he was benched for this game. They won against Cleveland, so they weren't going to bench him. Aiden O'Connell's in the wings, ready to go. But I think this is Gardner's last chance, my opinion. If Gardner doesn't win this game in Denver, you got to come back and play the Steelers at home. You go with Aiden O'Connell. So I think you're going to see Gardner Minshew use his legs more in this game. And what I mean by that is designed, get him outside the pocket, move him, have Bowers come across the middle, hit him on the run. And Gardner, if he throws and his feet aren't set, so he's rolling out and he's letting it go, he can put a ball up. He can put 2 balls up that Denver can get. So I don't know what to tell you. Zamir White's got a groin injury. He's the Raiders' young star running back out of Georgia. He hasn't gotten going this year. They have Alexander Madison, formerly of Minnesota. He had a good game last week. I think the Raiders finally ran the ball for 152 yards last week when they were averaging 49 yards. I mean, how can you average 49 yards? They were dead last in rushing, and they finally had a good game. So, long answer, I think the Raiders are going to try to run the ball, get Brock Bowers going in the passing game, keep it close, try to get the Raider fans who are there. Raider fans show up in Denver. You know that. Try to get them in the game, and then in the fourth quarter have a chance. But if Bo Nix has a big game, the Raiders are going to be in a tough spot. Bo Nix, if he throws for 240, 260, 300, which is going to happen sooner or later, then any team will be in trouble with the Broncos.
Yeah, that'll be more than he's done in any 2 games this year, though.
Yeah.
So it will be a big jump for both if that's the case. The Broncos probably trying to get it done on the ground as well as best as they can. Last one for you, GT. When you look at this and we look at the offensive struggles, is this one of those games where obviously it's a rivalry game, it's going to stay close? Is it kind of the first one to 17 wins? It feels that way.
That's amazing. Again, we're on the same page. I talked to a name drop, Fred Biletnikoff, the Hall of Famer this morning. He's like a second dad to me. We talk every day. And he said the same exact thing, not so much for this game, but he says the league feels to be like, hey, just get to the point where you can get 17 or 21 points on the board and then hold on. It's not like the old AFL, man, where it was just Al Davis. Then when Mr. Bolin came along with the Broncos dynasties, throw the ball up, Elway, plunk it, let's get in a shootout and get it into the 30s here. It could happen. I mean, if Devontae was 100% and everything was different with Devontae and Michael Mayer was playing with Brock Bowers, Trey Tucker, and Jacoby Myers, wow. You would have saw the Raiders that I wish you could see. You'd look at this Raiders going 4 wide and you go, man, that's a pretty damn good roster. And they don't even have their quarterback of the future yet. And they've been trying to get that. They just can't get a high enough pick. And they've been in no man's land from Derek Carr to Jimmy Garoppolo, now Gardner Minshew, Aiden O'Connell. They're trying to figure this out. But this is an important game because the Raiders are going through, I wouldn't say adversity because they're not divided. There's not a divided team. And anybody who thinks that in the national media doesn't know anything. They're not divided. But they got a massive distraction this week. Massive. I mean, the Raiders can't get on TV. And now they're leading First Take with Stephen A. because it's Devontae. So the Raiders go from 0 coverage as a 2-2 team, where Trevor Lawrence and Joe Burrow are getting more coverage than the Raiders or the Broncos. Now the Raiders are getting all the coverage for all the wrong reasons because of Devontae and his future here. And they got to go in and play Denver and try to keep the streak alive, because if the Raiders win, which they've won 8 in a row, and that would be 9, it's going to be 10 in a row because they'll win here in Vegas. If the Raiders lose this game, which they could lose, then Sean Payton will have something to go to the fans and say, hey, we got rid of Russell Wilson. I brought in Bo Nix. He won the first game in front of the alumni. We got something brewing here. Big game.
It's a big game for both teams for the 5th game of the season, for sure. Nobody knows more about the Raiders than JT the Bricks while we have a chance to talk to him. And so I know it's a busy week for you. It's always a busy week for you out in Vegas. Make sure you catch JT all the time, not only with the Raiders broadcast, but you can catch him everywhere. Omnipresent.
Yes, and one quick thing, I launched my YouTube channel. So I'd like everybody to get in there. JT the Brick YT. JT the Brick YT for YouTube. Launched it lightly in the summer. Oh my God, man. I am loving the world that you guys are dominating. And best to Nate, this whole world of YouTube is something I wish I would have started 20 years ago. Right? We couldn't. And I wish I would have started 5 years ago. But I'm really loving the audience and the ability to get on YouTube whenever I want and start ranting about sports. So thanks for letting me promote that.
Oh, anytime. Thanks so much. It's great to talk to you. And hopefully we'll do it again before game 2.
100%. Look forward to it.
All right, take care. Thanks, JT.
Thanks, brother. Talk to you soon, man. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
You got it. You got
JT,
it. See ya.
Joining us from Las Vegas. Terrific to talk to him, of course, as knowledgeable as there is on the Raiders anywhere in the entire country. You get an idea of what the Raiders are looking at as we get ready for the game this weekend. Obviously a big one for both teams, as explained there. Thursday Night Football kicks things off in just a little bit. We'll talk more about that with our friend Nate Lundy and have his best bets next.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Thursday night football is upon us already. Buccaneers and Falcons tonight, two teams that I think have some really interesting stories, and I don't know if we know much about them yet when we're talking about their styles of play. Obviously, the Bucs look really promising, 3-1. But they lost to the Broncos in embarrassing fashion. The Falcons have been close. They haven't been able to really quite get everything on the same page. Falcons 2.5-point favorites in this. The over-under 43.5. Obviously going to be played on that indoor track in Atlanta. How do you see this one playing out?
Well, I think one of the things that's interesting is that we're seeing that total move around a little bit. It kind of depends on what book you're looking at. We've seen 43.5. We've seen 44. I think it's likely between now and kickoff to settle in at 44 or 44.5 universally across the board. I think there's a lot of people that, to your point, talk about that track field that exists when it comes to the Mercedes-Benz Superdome, I think is what it's called. So I do think we've got a chance to be able to see some scoring. I think what's interesting is, Tampa. One of the reasons they lost to the Broncos, I'm not going to lie, is because they didn't have Vita Vea and they didn't have Antoine Winfield. I mean, which is, frankly, their two best defenders and the guys that are right up the middle. Both of those guys could be playing tonight. And I think that changes this Tampa team quite a bit. I think it gives them a lot of defense. And so I think it's actually kind of an interesting thing when we talk about the total being there at that 43 or 44, because I think both of these teams are capable of putting points on the board. But I also think that Atlanta made a very conscious effort right before the season started to invest in their defense. And I think Tampa is, frankly, doing the equivalent of that if they get both of these guys back tonight to be able to face off against Kirk Cousins. So I happen to believe that Atlanta is going to win the game. My tag team partner on the Fade 5 podcast, Brad Evans, disagrees. He actually thinks Tampa is going to win the game. But it's a 2.5-point spread, which means it's basically a pick 'em. That 2.5 is frankly just being thrown in Atlanta, in my opinion, because they're at home. They're home. And you're looking at that total at 44 as it sits right now. I think there are some people that are starting to hit the under on that because you probably saw the movement. Now people are going to turn around and try to be able to play below that. So I frankly think the better way to be able to try to play this game is through a handful of different player props and things like that. I have some that I like. I also want to talk a little bit about the wild card game, the deciding game tonight that's coming up between the Mets and the Brewers. But before I get to that, I don't have a lean one way or the other than the fact that I like Atlanta on the money line here, taking on Tampa, and it's simply a home field thing. If this game were in Tampa, I would be taking the Bucs. I got to be honest with you. I think these two teams match up fairly evenly. I think both of their quarterbacks are prone to mistakes. But Sean, before I get into some of the things that sort of caught my eye, I know you were working on, as always, a little primetime football SGP. Yeah. Let's start there.
Yeah, I do like that. There's a couple that I like. We'll start with the easy one. I like the Falcons to win this game, but with the over under at 2.5, this feels like a kind of game that might be 21-20, quite frankly, and could go higher than that, but it feels like that. And so I kind of like the idea, could I see Atlanta winning this 21-20? Yeah. So I picked the Falcons on the money line, took the alt line to the over under down to 40.5. So a 21-20 be 41. That would get us to the over, and that got us a plus 172. And I don't think that's that unreasonable if you like the idea that Atlanta is going to win this game. I find it tough to believe that it's going to get under 40. I just think indoors with the passing offenses available, I think that's a pretty safe bet on the over-under. The question is, do you like the Falcons? And I don't really like the Falcons by a field goal. It might be less than that. I think it will be a close game. So that's the first one I was looking at.
All right. What do you got for number 2?
The second one is easy. Just who likes passing, right? Most people like passing. Let's make it very, very simple. It doesn't matter who it goes to. Doesn't matter if they throw touchdowns. Nothing. I like trying to get into a little bit of plus money when you can. Kirk Cousins, Baker Mayfield, over 225 passing yards each. Doesn't matter if they do anything but just get the yardage, 225 each. If they both hit it, plus 152.
I like that. So a couple of ways you can be able to play it. One, as Sean just said, you got a way to be able to play it if you want to think about who's going to win and what the total might be. And then another way where you can just stay away from those things completely. That is also the way that I tend to lean in some of these primetime games. I tend to go towards some player props as opposed to spreads and totals, unless I'm just really feeling it one way or the other. So with that in mind, let me throw some player props at you that I actually found to be kind of fun. We did this last week. Let's go back into it again. Drake London. Give me London to have 10 or more receiving yards in the first quarter. That's it. That's all I'm looking for. Now, he has a challenging matchup if we're going to talk about the secondary side of things, but let me throw a couple of numbers here at you. First and foremost, over the course of the season, he's got 5 catches for 60 yards in the first quarter of the games. He's gone over this total in 2 out of the 4 that they have played. One of the other ones, he had 6. So he's been right there, which means he's being targeted by Kirk Cousins early in the game. They try to establish him, and he's more than capable of doing this with 1 catch. Doesn't always happen, but he's more than capable of doing it. And in some of the games, if you go in and look at the times that Drake London did not go at least for 10 yards within the first quarter, you can go back and look at the way the play calling laid out, and you can see that he was being targeted. And that's one of the things that you want to see. In fact, I think it was either last week or the week before, Kirk Cousins was targeting him down the field, what would have been a really nice gain for him, and the ball winds up getting picked off. And so that kind of changes things. That's why I'm throwing it out there as something to pay attention to. You may want to lean into that as just a one-and-done first quarter type of play. As long as we're talking about some receiving yards, I found this on DraftKings this morning. I do really like this one. Bijan Robinson and Rachaad White to combine for 50 or more receiving yards in the game. So it means if it goes heavily one way or the other, you're still fine. If you want to talk about projections, some of the sites that I like that run they simulate the game 20,000 times, things like that, have projections for these two guys combined to be in the mid to upper 50s. And so we're already looking at a little bit of a cushion at DraftKings. This is a standard juice at a -110, but I really like this game because it's not me saying I need 25 out of each. It's saying I need 50 combined. So if Bijan Robinson breaks one for 28, that obviously is going to help our overall 50 total. And so I do really like this one as an option for you to be able to play. The other thing you can dive into if you want to build an SGP like what Sean was doing is start to go in and look at receptions across the board. So let's talk about receptions for Drake London. Let's talk about receptions for Chris Godwin. We can do the same thing for Bijan Robinson, for Rachaad White, as well as Kyle Pitts. And I know a lot of you fantasy owners, including this guy right here, that made an investment in Kyle Pitts are probably pissed off so far this season, and I don't blame you. You should be. But I do think that Pitts is good for at least 3 catches in this game. There's also a prop out there that DK has for Pitts to get 5 or more receptions, which I think is a stretch. However, it pays 4-1. So if you think that they may actually try to target him, I would do that. I also think, guess what, folks? It's under the primetime lights. What does Kirk Cousins tend to do in prime time? Throw it to the other team. So if you're looking for something either to bet by itself or to make a part of one of your same game parlays, I think Kirk Cousins is good for an interception. I just do, because that's what the dude does. I'm not even sure necessarily that you might not want to do a same game parlay for each of them to throw a pick in terms of Baker Mayfield as well as Kirk Cousins. But son of a bitch, guys, it's prime time. This is what Kirk does. Okay. He might look good. Hell, he might win the game, just like I'm calling. I think Atlanta's going to win the game, but he's probably going to make a mistake at some point in time because there's just something inside that noggin of his that screws up when he gets into prime time. All right. Last one for you here. My favorite anytime touchdown prop for tonight is Bucky Irving, in part because I just like saying his name.
That is fun.
Bucky Irving. Here's the reason why. I'm following. This is recency bias. This could change, but follow me here. Last week for Tampa against Philadelphia. All right. Philadelphia is not really a slouch, right? Last week against Philadelphia, Rachaad White, this many. See it on the screen? 0 red zone touches. Do you know who got all 5 red zone touches? Bucky Irving. Plus 180 at FanDuel. By the way, this is plus 130 at some of the other books. You're getting an extra 50 cents at FanDuel.
Wow. Cousins up Thursday Night Football in his career, 67% completion. However, 14 touchdowns to 12 interceptions.
1-to-1,
4
baby.
quarterbacks have ever thrown 12 interceptions. It's obviously Cousins, Jay Cutler, Matt Ryan, and Drew Brees, the only guys that have ever thrown as many as 12. So that's an interesting one. I kind of like the one putting it together with maybe they both throw one.
I do. There's
way,
a lot of
do
games.
that, and you could do mine at plus 225, and they can both hit.
Well, here's the other thing you could do.
Matter.
Let me throw this at you. Take each one of them to throw an interception, and then take Sean's totals down to 200 instead of 225. You're still going to be in plus territory. Trust me.
Oh yeah.
So you could give yourself a cushion just in case. But look, I'm excited about this game because, look, we've been saying all week about the fact that this is a game that means a lot to the Raiders and to the Broncos this weekend, because each team's sitting at 2-2. Everybody looking up at the Chiefs. What's Bo Nix going to do, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Look, the NFC South is, put the Panthers to the side, although, now that they're not trotting out Bryce Young, who knows? This NFC South game tonight means a lot for both of these teams. So I think this is going to be a fun one tonight.
Yeah, I think it will too. I'm looking forward to it for sure. Well, we have Thursday Night Football going first of day of 55 straight nights.
55 straight nights of either college or pro football.
That's a lot.
Giddy up.
Well, enjoy that. But you know what's coming? Because we talked about it yesterday. The Avalanche are less than a week away from their regular season opener. The Denver Nuggets a little further out, but their preseason opener is quite literally tomorrow, 10 a.m. Locally, as it turns out, because of the time change in Abu Dhabi, where the Denver Nuggets are set to take on the Boston Celtics. And joining us to discuss that is our friend Ryan Blackburn, of course, head of all the Nuggets content here and the Pickaxe and Roll podcast, and a man who's about to become a lot busier than he already is, because here we go. It's time, Ryan. The preseason starts now.
Starts now, and it feels like everybody's back to school, man. It feels like everybody is excited to be here. I'm really looking forward to this game tomorrow, just because you've got the Nuggets and the Celtics, the two most recent title winners in the NBA. They've had great matchups in the past, and this isn't going to be the most competitive thing of all time because it's an exhibition game, of course, but I am very excited to see what the Denver Nuggets look like with a new starter in Christian Braun out there. That should be very interesting.
Johnson will miss these games with a hamstring injury. Obviously, it's not expected to be a huge deal, but Michael Malone made it clear that there's no reason to risk him at this point, and that makes sense. But when you think about the idea, especially, let's just go with Christian Braun, and let me tie it with the signing of Russell Westbrook. Westbrook at Media Day talked about how part of what he was looking forward to do was basically helping Jamal Murray become the best version of himself. Now, what does that look like? Can that happen with him coming off the bench? Or are we looking at a situation that if Christian Braun can't start knocking down more shots, not that Westbrook's good at an outside shooting world either, but can you see a situation where Westbrook and Murray end up starting together, or the Nuggets firmly committed and they're going to make Christian Braun, this is going to make this happen?
I think they're relatively firmly committed. I don't want to say outright that it cannot happen, but the Nuggets have two shooting guards on their roster. They have Christian Braun and Julian Strawther. Mm-hmm. They really only have two rotation caliber point guards on their roster in Jamal Murray and Russell Westbrook. And I think it just makes more sense. Just balancing out those lineups, not complicating things, making sure that everybody's on the same page. Russell Westbrook is going to run the second unit. That's his job. That's how he's going to approach things. And I think that while there is a world where he could be closing some games, there's no doubt about that, especially if he plays pretty well. I would say that most important thing for this Nuggets team is to just push forward how important it is to get that bench better and not worry too much about the starting unit. Christian Braun can fit there. There's no question in my mind that he can fit there. And I think you're going to see it tomorrow morning, actually.
Yeah, 10 a.m. will be the start. The bench takes a hit, obviously, early in Summer League. Deron Holmes, the Nuggets first-round selection, a guy that I actually followed pretty closely. I'm fully aware of how he plays. I really loved that draft pick. But now they end up missing him for the season, a guy that was expected to be an immediate contributor in the front court and defensively. He is gone, and that means that, again, like Fetch and Mean Girls, the Nuggets have to try to make Zeke Naji happen. It's not going to happen. But anyway, Dario Saric was added, and it seems like people have forgotten about Dario Saric entirely and forgotten that he was even added to the team. Saric brings an awful lot to that second unit, being able to back up also a couple different positions.
Yeah, he will be, I think, your hybrid backup 4, backup 5. I was surprised at how big he is, if I'm being honest. I was surprised how big he is physically for a team that has had problems with size, obviously, in the past. He's not the best rebounder, but he is somebody that I think can really help Denver from an offensive perspective, especially. He's versatile. He's smart. He's a good playmaker. He does a lot of things well that the team needs that they've lacked when Nikola Jokic goes to the bench. So I think that there are some reasons to believe in what he can provide, how he can help Russell Westbrook consistently, and what the Nuggets are looking for to not just hemorrhage points like they have in the past with their second unit.
Yeah, and that's leads me maybe to the other question about, especially if you take Christian Brown off the bench and now you have to maybe reassemble that. Do the Nuggets really have enough shooters? Christian Brown is not the shooter that KCP was. Granted, I get it. KCP was the number 5 option on the starting 5. We understand that, and Christian Brown will probably be the same. But you remove Brown's offensive ability, maybe as a slasher, a guy that can drive and fast break from the bench now. I just look at the Nuggets and boys think, where are their knockdown shooters? Because it is not Brown. It is not Westbrook. It is not Payton Watson. Does this team have it when they need it? And who might it be? Is it Strawther?
It's probably going to have to be, right? Like Julian Strawther last year did not shoot an efficient percentage. There's no question about it. I think it was under 29%, I want to say. And that is not a good number for a shooting guard. It's not something where if you want him taking a lot of shots, if you want him spacing the floor, you're going to need him to shoot at least 35%. At least kind of get into that normal range. And he is a player that teams treat as an outside shooting threat. There's no question about it. And so we hear this word gravity get thrown out there a lot of the time. Julian Strawther has a lot of gravity because of the difficulty of the threes that he takes. I would love to see Denver find some ways to get him some easier shots, get him some comfortable shots, make sure that he is mixing in some of those difficult looks with some easy ones to kind of get that percentage up a little bit. And then Saric, as I mentioned before, he is a really important piece. He shot just under 38% from 3 with the Warriors last year. But the key factor there is that he shot a whole bunch of them. He shot, I think, like 8 or 9 3-point attempts per 100 possessions. And that is a really important thing because it's as much about the threat as it is about anything else.
When you look at the composition of the roster now, minus Holmes, and you try to look at the Nuggets in a way where they can save minutes where possible for Jokic and for Aaron Gordon, who battled with injuries for a lot of the last season, where does that get soaked up? Obviously, Najee's part of the equation. Obviously, Saric is part of the equation. But this team doesn't appear to be, at least at this stage to me, necessarily going to have that hockey line change where the next 5 guys comes on. It's definitely going to be a lot of mixing and matching when the second unit is on the floor, right?
Yeah, I'm fascinated to see how it works out. I think the most likely thing is that Jamal Murray staggers with the second unit and then Denver plays a little bit smaller. They move Julian Strawther to the 3, Peyton Watson to the 4, and Darius Arch to the 5. But I also think that there's a world where it makes more sense for Michael Porter Jr. to be the starter that staggers with the second unit, provide a little bit more spacing, a little bit more size, somebody who plays off the ball a little bit more, allows Russell Westbrook to handle a little bit more consistently. But this is going to be a thing that goes on for, I think, a fair amount of the season, where sometimes it will be Mike, sometimes it will be Jamal, depending on the matchups. You might see a different answer. If Denver goes too deeper into their bench, don't be surprised if Hunter Tyson is a name that you hear out there. He's been playing really well in training camp, and I think is a 3-point spacer that the Nuggets could need. Somebody that if you're looking for more shooting, he's a guy that could provide it. Then Vlatko Čančar and Zeke Naji will factor in somewhere. I don't know what it's ultimately going to look like with the 5 because DeAndre Jordan might be somebody who actually plays a little bit more, and you might be surprised at how much he plays. But they're going to mix and match. It's not going to be a consistent lineup every single night. Michael Malone is going to have to find out which lineup gives him the best chance to win, and they'll probably roll with that.
Yeah, Tyson, remember for folks, a double-digit rebounder his last year in college. So a guy that can play a little D, can rebound as well. One of the players that at least last year the Nuggets thought might be able to contribute. And now this year, maybe there's an opportunity sort of on that second wave after the hype is gone to sneak in under the radar. Ryan, when you're looking at the roster as it stands right now, and you realize the Nuggets' expectations now, amazingly, are championship. Do they have enough to do that as it stands? Do they have enough to get to the Western Conference Finals as it stands? If they don't, where are they lacking? And is there a way they could pull it off?
I think they do have enough. I think it's going to take a little bit of creativity, going to take a little bit of development from the younger guys and sort of a recalibration of what those guys are for the Nuggets. Like last year, Christian Brown was not an essential piece every night. This year, he has to be. This year, he's going to be somebody that can't just go for 5 points and 2 rebounds and 1 assist and shoot 2 of 7 and not necessarily fit in that well. He's got to be great pretty much every single night, or at least consistent every single night. I think Payton Watson, you're going to start with the same thing. Although without him in training camp and when he's got this injury that he's dealing with, a hamstring injury that's probably going to hold him out for much of preseason, I'm a little bit concerned about that for sure. That's going to be something that I'm monitoring. Like, Christian Braun didn't have a good start to the year last year because and not just because, but in part because he missed some of that early training camp and preseason time to really get accustomed to what he was supposed to be doing. And then how does Russell Westbrook fit into all of this? Could he be great in this role? I think there's a possibility. Could he be terrible in this role? I think it's a possibility there too. So we're gonna find out together. But I'm really looking forward to seeing what this Nuggets bench can do, adding to what is a championship core clearly with their starting unit.
It does feel like the whole season is something of a high wire act, right? Because so many things kind of have to go right. So many pieces have to fit. So many young guys have to ascend. The truth of it is when teams count on a lot of those things, multiple things needing to go right, the odds are they don't all go right. So if they don't, whatever that is, whether it's injuries, whether Westbrook isn't a fit, whether Watson doesn't make the requisite leap that the Nuggets are hoping for, how much flexibility do they really have to do much of anything given the salary cap limitations? Or is this going to be, despite the fact he's won a title and that always feels like the biggest hill, I'm looking at this year and thinking this is going to be Michael Malone's toughest year as a coach. What does he need to do, given all of these things that need to go right, to manage that, to take his game to the next level? Because the coaches have to do that as well.
Yeah, Michael Malone's got an interesting coaching run in him. I think this is going to be one where a lot of his norms are going to be challenged with Denver. He got into a very comfortable place last year where he just mostly ran 4 starters at once and then staggered Jamal with the second unit. Kind of hemorrhaged points a little bit there, but because the Nugget starters were so good, it didn't really matter. This year, I don't think he can get away with that as much. I think that there are going to be teams that are very ready for what the Nuggets are doing. They know exactly what you're hoping to accomplish, and like, the lack of spacing is going to be a thing that the Nuggets have to sort of battle against on both the starting and second units. So Michael Malone's got to get creative, man. This is going to be something where he can't always approach it the same way. Sometimes he's going to have to change things up, and sometimes he's going to have to make some very difficult choices. Maybe that is playing less Russell Westbrook at times. Maybe it's playing more Russell Westbrook at times. That is like you called it, a live wire situation. The Nuggets are trying to figure it out. They're trying to understand exactly what they have. I think they'll be a little slower out of the gate trying to figure some things out, but by like game 12, game 13, they're going to go back to the normal Nuggets.
When you look at preseason and you break down NBA preseason schedules, and this team in particular, given all of the things that we're discussing, what can you learn from these preseason games, especially these couple in Abu Dhabi, before we come back and see the rest of the preseason run?
Well, you can look at Jamal Murray and the way that he's playing, the way that he's moving. I think he looked pretty good in the scrimmage portion that we saw. Looks pretty athletic. We're seeing some dunks in the practices in Abu Dhabi that are pretty impressive. So I think that there is something to be said about a little bit of a Jamal renaissance after the tough offseason and the tough playoff run that he had. There's something to be said for that, just kind of resting, recovering, figuring some stuff out, and clearing the head a little bit. If he can get off to a really good start against Boston, that would make a lot of people feel better. The other thing, Michael Porter Jr., 235 now, or at least upwards of 235. He was playing it closer to 218 to 220 in previous seasons. So you've got a little bit of extra muscle there, somebody who can maybe throw around that 6'10 frame a little bit more. If that changes his game in any way and he can get to the free throw line a little bit more, that really helps him. I think he could honestly, he could probably average 20 points a game if you give him an opportunity to do so. And I think the Nuggets are going to have to without KCP out there.
Last one for you. You brought up Jamal Murray, and it really feels to me like he's really the linchpin of this season. You know what you've got in Jokic. You know what you've gotten in Gordon. There is room to improve for Porter Jr., but what he provides is pretty much steady. it's been the up and down for Jamal Murray. Now he's got the new contract. No more worrying about contract stuff, and that's been hovering for a couple of years now. Now that's handled, hopefully a little bit more healthy. How much of this, from your perspective, has been in Jamal Murray's head, and how much of this has been recovery from various injuries?
I think you could say that Jamal Murray is the linchpin every season, every single one. I go back to the bubble as far back as then. Think of how important he has been since that point to the entire title picture, not just Denver's title race, but the entire title picture and how he has played and how the Nuggets have responded to how he has played. That is the same thing going forward for these next 5 years. If he is the level of player that he was in 2023, coming back from that injury, raising his game, elevating as a playoff level player, the Nuggets are going to be right back in the thick of the title race, and people are going to be laughing at some of the statements that were made about losing Kentavious Caldwell-Pope and Bruce Brown. If he is closer to 2024, where he's a little bit banged up, he's a little bit injured, you're not necessarily providing as much oomph on the game that you've had previously, then people are going to have some real questions about Denver's ceiling and their title concerns for the coming seasons, because this contract is a big deal. It is both a blessing and a curse for him because he's now locked in everything, but there is a certain level of expectation that comes with that. I think he's really good in general at handling high expectations. He always rises to the occasion in these situations, but if he's not healthy to do it, if other teams sort of get under his skin, then that could upturn itself very, very quickly. So I'm really looking forward to this Jamal Murray season. I could see it going any number of ways. More likely than not, he'll be slightly better because he always, in aggregate, tends to improve just a little bit over time. And that could really help the Nuggets in the long run.
Well, Nuggets fans certainly hope so. You'll get your first look at this year's version of the team tomorrow morning out in Abu Dhabi. It'll be 10 a.m. for the tip here in Denver. The Nuggets and the Celtics going at it, the last two champs, maybe the matchup that the NBA would even like to see coming up this year. We'll find out a little bit more about it. The Nuggets get to write that story for themselves. But here we are. The offseason's over. Basketball season is here. You want to make sure you follow Ryan for all of the latest and check out the podcast as well. Thanks so much for the time. Looking forward to breaking this season down with you.
Thanks, Sean. Really appreciate it. Go Nuggets.
Thanks so much. Ryan Blackburn joining us. The Nuggets will get it off, as we pointed out, Abu Dhabi. They are the highlighted feature here, the team that the NBA wants to share all around the world with the Celtics. And who would have thought for the Nuggets all those years ago, all those long-suffering Nuggets fans, that would be the case. Tomorrow is a football Friday. Of course, tonight you have Thursday Night Football. We just went over all those best bets with Nate. If you wanted to check out any part of it you missed, you can just drag that little slider over at YouTube and check it out, or you can get it on demand any way you'd like. Thanks for listening to the program and watching the program. You can click and subscribe for more. We appreciate however you consume it, and we'll be back at it tomorrow with a Football Friday. When we say Football Friday, we do it differently than everybody else. We go from the preps to the pros, high school, college, pro, all of it. We cover it right here. We'll have Dan Mormon from Colorado Preps, Troy Rank from the Denver Post, breaking it all down for you tomorrow. Can't wait to get back at it. Danny Bailey's the man in the booth that makes all of it work. Thanks to Nate Lundy, who was sitting with me, of course. Ryan Blackburn, who you just heard covering the Nuggets, and JT the Brick out in Vegas, dropping in and giving us the latest on the Raiders. Always good to talk to JT. We'll be back at it tomorrow. Thanks for listening to Mile High Sports.